Think about the last time you watched a news anchor say the words, "energy markets remain stable." You probably changed the channel, but somewhere in that sentence is a number that controls the price of everything you buy, heat your home with, and fill your tank with. That number runs through a single island in the Persian Gulf that you have almost certainly never heard of, Kharg Island. 22 square kilometers of coral rock and steel infrastructure that processes 90% of Iran's crude oil export volume. Every supertanker that leaves that island carries enough energy value to power a mid-sized European country for a week. The global price of oil does not move because of decisions made in boardrooms. It moves because of what happens on that island. And for 40 years, Iran treated that fact as an untouchable shield. The logic was clean, and Iran knew it. If you strike Kharg, you spike the global energy market. If you spike the global energy market, you destabilize every allied economy that depends on Persian Gulf oil. If you destabilize every allied economy, you make the strike politically unaffordable, regardless of how justified it was militarily. The IRGC did not just put military hardware on Kharg Island. They wrapped their most aggressive military posture in the one piece of geography that they calculated no Western government would ever authorize a strike against. The island was not protected by missiles. It was protected by the assumption that the cost of hitting it was too high for any rational actor to pay. At 0147 hours this morning, that assumption expired. Pro-Iranian militia forces operating under IRGC direction launched a coordinated swarm of Shahed 136 loitering munitions and Noor cruise missiles into civilian petroleum infrastructure across the Gulf region. It was not a military operation. It was an act of deliberate economic warfare, a calculated attempt to demonstrate that Iran could set the global energy market on fire whenever it chose to, and that the world would absorb the cost rather than respond. They expected the standard template, a Security Council statement, a few cruise missiles into empty desert, and a return to the negotiating table where Iran would be in a stronger position than before because it had just demonstrated willingness to strike civilian energy infrastructure. They were calculating against the wrong template. The decision to strike Kharg Island's military infrastructure while leaving the oil processing infrastructure intact is the kind of mission that gets described as impossible in planning meetings and then handed to the people who have spent 20 years building the capability to do it anyway. The margin is not comfortable. The IRGC's hardened missile launcher positions are separated from primary crude oil pipelines by distances measured in tens of meters in some cases. An imprecise weapon that misses by 100 feet in the wrong direction does not just fail the mission, it triggers the economic catastrophe the entire operation is designed to prevent. This is not a bombing campaign. It is a high-speed engineering problem, where the tolerance for error is measured in single digits, and the consequence of exceeding that tolerance is a global oil price event that makes the strike worse than doing nothing. The kill. Webb does not find this interesting. It finds it routine. The sequence that is about to unfold does not begin with an aircraft. It does not begin with a missile. It begins in the digital layer that sits beneath every physical military action, the layer that most analyses skip because it produces no footage and no explosions and no visible evidence of its own existence. 72 hours before the first physical weapon crosses Iranian airspace, U.S. Cyber Command and Space Force begin what the operational architecture calls the severance. It is not a broad internet disruption. It is not the kind of cyber attack that produces headlines. It is the precise, targeted degradation of the specific encrypted data protocols that allow the Bavar 373 battery on Kharg's northern shoreline to share targeting data with the S300 PMU2 installation covering the eastern approach corridor. It is the severing of the fiber optic handshake that lets the Khordad 1.5 medium-altitude system receive cueing from the national air picture. It is the corruption of the timing synchronization that allows the coastal missile battery commanders to coordinate a simultaneous multi-axis launch. Each link goes down in a way that looks like equipment degradation rather than perfescence. External attack. A timing drift here. A packet loss rate there. A handshake failure that the maintenance logs will attribute to humidity in the fiber conduit. By 0100 hours tonight, the air defense network on Kharg Island is physically intact. Every radar is spinning. Every missile is in its tube. Every console is manned. The system looks operational from the inside. It is not operational. It is a collection of isolated nodes that can see their own sector and cannot share what they see with anyone else. The battery commander on the northern pier has no idea what the battery commander on the southern revetment is tracking. The coastal missile crews have no updated targeting picture from the National Air Operations Center because the link that carries that picture has been silently corrupted for 48 hours. Every operator on the island is making decisions against an information picture that stopped being accurate 2 days ago without anyone noticing. This is the civilian metaphor that captures it most precisely. Imagine a security team protecting a building where every guard's radio has been subtly detuned so that each one thinks they are communicating normally, but none of them can actually hear the others. The cameras are on. The guards are at their posts. The building looks defended. But the moment anything happens, every guard responds in isolation, without coordination. And each one's individual response makes the collective response weaker rather than stronger. That is Kharg Island at 0115 hours tonight. At 0130 hours, the Tomahawk Block V missiles leave the vertical launch cells of the USS Cole and the USS Gravely, holding their positions in the northern Gulf. The Tomahawk Block V travels at 550 miles per hour. It is not a fast weapon, it is a patient one. At the distance from launch point to target, the transit time is approximately 87 minutes. The Tomahawk launches first in this sequence because it is slowest and therefore dictates the timeline for everything else. Every other element of the operation, the electronic warfare aircraft, the decoy drones, the stealth fighters, the precision strike package has exactly 87 minutes to complete its work before the Tomahawks arrive at the coastline. If the air defense network is still functional when those missiles cross the shore, they will be engaged and destroyed. The Tomahawks are not the weapon that clears the path. They are the weapon that uses the cleared path. The entire preceding sequence exists to ensure there is nothing left to shoot them down. At 0200 hours, the ADM 160 MALD decoy drones release from B-52 Stratofortress's holding station in international airspace well outside Iranian radar coverage. The MALD weighs 300 pounds and costs less than a well-equipped sports utility vehicle. Its signature augmentation system, a Lüneburg lens, and carefully shaped aluminum airframe returns a radar cross-section consistent with a large combat aircraft. To the Bavar 373. Operators on Kharg, watching their mirage. 4 radar display. What appears at 0200 hours is their nightmare scenario. A multi-axis strike package of what appear to be high-value manned aircraft pushing toward the island from 3 separate vectors simultaneously. The isolated battery commanders, each seeing only their own sector's piece of the picture, each cut off from coordinating with adjacent units, make the decision they have been trained to make. They engage. There is no correct alternative from their perspective. If those contacts are real aircraft and the batteries do not fire, the island is struck. The training says, engage immediately, before the weapons are in range, before positive identification is possible. The training is correct against a conventional threat. It is catastrophically wrong against what is happening tonight. Each Bavar 373 interceptor costs between $2 and $4 million to produce. Each MALD decoy costs $35,000. The exchange ratio running against the IRGC in these first 30 minutes of physical engagement is approximately 70-1 in favor of the side that launched the Ghosts. But the financial loss is secondary to the tactical consequence of each launch. Every time a fire control radar switches to continuous high-power emission mode to guide an interceptor toward a target, it is broadcasting its precise location on frequencies that the F-35C Lightning II aircraft, orbiting silently at the outer edge of the island's detection range, are cataloging with their AN/ASQ-239 passive sensor suite. The Mirage, 4 radar that can detect a conventional fighter at 240 miles, cannot detect an F-35 at 50 miles, because the F-35's radar cross-section is approximately the size of a steel ball bearing. The Iranian batteries are firing at decoys and screaming their coordinates to aircraft they cannot see. By 0230 hours, the ready interceptor magazines are substantially depleted, and the kill web has a complete, real-time, precision-located targeting map of every active radar position on the island. This is what the operational plan calls the illumination phase. The IRGC's own defensive reflex has just compiled. At 0235 hours, the EA-18G Growlers move from passive monitoring to active suppression. The AN-ALQ-99 Next Generation Jammer System does not broadcast broad-spectrum interference. That approach creates clutter. The NGJ uses its active electronically scanned array to generate a precisely focused waveform calibrated against the specific receiver architecture of each individual radar type it has been targeting. The result is not clutter on the Iranian displays. It is a complete whiteout of the receiver. The antenna is physically undamaged. The display shows nothing but saturated noise at maximum signal strength. The operator is staring at a screen that has become a solid wall of white and cannot be cleared by any adjustment he knows how to make. Into this blind environment, the F-35Cs release the AGM-88G Advanced Anti-Radiation Guided Missile. The AGM-88G is the definitive answer to the question that Iranian air defense engineers have been working on for 3 decades. How do you protect a radar from a missile that homes on radar emissions? The answer the AGM-88G provides is that the question has no answer. The weapons seeker operates in 3 independent modes simultaneously: passive radar homing for initial acquisition, GPS-assisted inertial navigation that memorizes the target's last known position if the radar goes silent mid-flight, active millimeter wave terminal guidance that searches for the physical structure of the installation once it reaches the terminal phase. There is no combination of radar behavior that defeats all 3 modes at once. Leave the radar on, the missile follows the beam to the antenna. Turn the radar off, the missile holds the memorized coordinates and then uses its own sensor to find the truck. The only remaining option is to abandon the launcher entirely and drive away, which removes it from the network permanently and achieves the same tactical result as destroying it. Within 22 minutes, the Bavar and S-300 fire control radars on Kharg Island have either been struck or abandoned. The Cordad, 5 batteries covering the medium-altitude approach corridor, have gone silent. The coastal missile batteries, whose operators attempted to continue tracking contacts using degraded backup systems, have been geolocated and targeted. The air defense envelope that Iran spent 4 decades and an estimated $40 billion constructing over this island is gone. Not suppressed, not degraded, gone. And the Tomahawks launched 81 minutes ago are now 6 minutes from the shoreline with nothing in front of them. But there is still a surface threat. The IRGC has scrambled its fast attack boat fleet from the hardened pier facilities on the island's western face. 38 Zulfiqar-class and Siraj-class fast interceptors pushing into the waters around the island at 45 knots. Their mission is not to engage the carrier strike group at range. Their mission is to get close enough to the escort destroyers to create the dilemma. If you engage the swarm, you pull defensive attention away from the missile threats. If you handle the missile threats, the swarm reaches close-range firing distance. The Iranian doctrine for this scenario is 40 years old and well-rehearsed. The A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft that have been flying low-level orbits over the Gulf's surface at 500 feet since before the operation began were not included in most analysts' threat assessments for a high-intensity air campaign against a sophisticated integrated air defense system. They are not stealth aircraft. They are not precision-guided munitions platforms in the traditional sense. What they are is the most lethal anti-surface platform in low-threat airspace that has ever been produced. And the airspace over the waters around Kharg Island is now the lowest threat environment in the Persian Gulf because everything that could have engaged them is either destroyed, abandoned, or staring at a white screen. The GAU-8 Avenger cannon fires depleted uranium rounds at 4,200 rounds per minute. Against a fiberglass and aluminum fast attack craft, moving at 45 knots with no armor and a fuel tank, the physical effect of a 2-second burst is not damage. It is structural dissolution. Working in coordinated sweeps with MH, 60R Seahawk helicopters providing targeting support, and AGR-20 APKWS rocket fire against the boats that attempt evasion turns. The A-10S neutralized the fast attack swarm in 14 minutes. 38 boats leave the pier facilities. But, none of them reach the outer defensive screen of the carrier strike group. At 0257 hours, the Tomahawks cross Kharg Island's coastline. The navigational update they received through the data link 12 minutes before arrival confirmed their final aim points and adjusted for the 2 launcher positions that were relocated during the engagement. The weapons do not fly toward the oil terminals. They do not fly toward the refinery infrastructure. They navigate around it, using their terrain-matching sensor and onboard camera to verify their approach corridors in real time. They thread through the gap between the crude oil loading infrastructure and the hardened submarine pin facilities on the island's southern face, delivering their 2,000-pound unitary warheads through the reinforced roof structures of the IRGC command bunkers and the specialized maintenance facilities where the anti-ship missile reload equipment is stored. The submarine pins that house the Gadir-class miniature submarines collapse under the blast overpressure. The command infrastructure that coordinates the island's military activities ceases to exist as functional hardware in a 40-second window. The oil loading terminals continue operating. The crude transfer pipelines are undamaged. The supertanker that was moored at the primary export pier when the operation began is still moored at the primary export pier when the operation ends. The IRGC response arrives at 0312 hours. Fateh. 110 short-range ballistic missiles from mobile launchers in western Iran that survived the opening phase, and Shahed, loitering munitions from coastal positions along the mainland. The targeting data those weapons are using was loaded before the operation began because the systems that would have allowed real-time targeting updates have been destroyed or abandoned. They are firing at pre-planned coordinates, not at the actual positions of the assets they are trying to hit. The USS Abraham Lincoln's Aegis Baseline 10 combat system, processing SPY-6 radar data fused across the strike group through the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network, assigns intercept solutions to all 41 inbound tracks simultaneously. The SM-6 interceptors handle the ballistic threats. The evolved Sea Sparrow handles the cruise threats. The rolling airframe missiles handle the Shahed munitions that get through the first 2 intercept layers. The Lincoln does not change course during the engagement. Its flight deck launches a reconnaissance patrol as the last Iranian weapon is intercepted. By 0340 hours, Kharg Island's military infrastructure is gone. The oil infrastructure is intact. The global energy market, which opened in London approximately 40 minutes after the engagement concluded, does not register a meaningful price movement on Brent crude. The risk premium that traders had been pricing into Gulf energy for 4 decades, the premium that reflected the market's assessment that the IRGC could hold the global energy supply hostage whenever it chose to, is being repriced in real time. Because the instrument of that hostage-taking no longer exists. Now look at this from the altitude that lets you see what actually happened tonight. Because the tactical picture, as complete as it is, understates the strategic result by a significant margin. The IRGC's entire deterrence architecture on Kharg Island rested on a single assumption: that the precision required to destroy military targets without damaging adjacent civilian infrastructure was beyond the capability of any realistic strike package. And therefore, the existence of that civilian infrastructure created a permanent shield for the military assets parked next to it. This assumption was not unreasonable when it was formed. It was built against the precision capability that existed when the island's current military configuration was designed. It was tested against the precision capability that exists now, which has been improving continuously since the day the Kharg Island Defense Plan was last updated. The GBU-39 small-diameter bomb that the F-35Cs used against the surface launcher positions has a circular error, probable of less than 5 feet. 5 feet. The LRASM autonomous anti-ship missiles used against the boat facilities use artificial intelligence to select aim points within a target structure, rather than just striking the structure's center mass. The Tomahawk Block V's onboard camera verifies aim point accuracy in the final seconds of flight and can adjust its terminal approach by meters to avoid adjacent infrastructure. The weapon's tolerance for collateral damage is not a policy constraint being applied to a less accurate system. It is a technical specification baked into the guidance architecture of every weapon in this package. The kill web does not avoid the oil terminals because it has been ordered to. It avoids the oil terminals because it can, and because the ability to. Iran built a wall on the assumption that the wall was too expensive to touch. The wall was expensive to touch in 1985. It is not expensive to touch now because the technology that makes touching it precisely possible did not exist in 1985. The assumption expired with the technology gap that created it. Every other adversary that has built a similar deterrence architecture around civilian infrastructure is currently updating its threat model. The tankers are loading. The sea lanes are open. The price of oil at the pump where you filled your car this week is not going to change because of what happened tonight. And that stability, the absence of any visible disruption in the energy market that Iran spent 40 years positioning itself to threaten, is the precise measure of the operation's success. Not the crater count on Kharg Island, not the destroyed launcher positions. The fact that the instrument of economic coercion has been removed and the economy it was threatening kept running without pause. The IRGC believed the island was untouchable. The kill web just demonstrated that untouchable was always a function of capability rather than a property of the geography. The island is still there. What was on it is not. If you want to understand how the precision architecture behind this operation actually functions, and what it means for every adversary that has built military infrastructure adjacent to civilian targets, assuming that adjacency provides permanent protection, subscribe. We break down the real technical capability, not the version that appears in declassified summaries. And tell me in the comments, if Iran had dispersed its military assets more thoroughly across the island's civilian infrastructure rather than concentrating them in dedicated military zones, does the precision calculus change? Think through what that means for the weapons involved before you answer. The answer is more specific than most people expect. The scenario described in this video is a technical and tactical analysis based on real military assets, published defense specifications, and documented regional tensions. The specific operational sequences are hypothetical dramatizations created to illustrate U.S. military integrated precision strike doctrine, kill web architecture, and multi-domain operational sequencing.